All right. Well, thank you everybody for being here today. I'm in my virtual world right now in a sunny, remote part of the world where everything's happy and cheerful and it's bright out and it's blue and it's amazing. But this is my virtual background, so it's not my real background. But I like to have it a little bit a little interesting to look at that versus a white wall. But thank you for being here today. This is the introduction to TigerGraph 2020 Graphathon. Before we get started, this is who I am. My name is Jonathan Herkey. I'm a developer technology evangelist. My background is a BS in computer information systems, basically networking and database and application development. I'm also a founder of a nonprofit called Futurist Academy, where we take emerging technologies and address education gaps. I was in 8 years in the military and as a computer networking engineer. What that meant is I program routers and switches. I go out to the middle of nowhere, shoot up to a satellite, grab an uplink, and deploy a network. Did that for 8 years. And then also worked just over 6 years at United Health Group. Worked in their data centers, ended up being an entrepreneur in residence, building healthcare startups, and then transitioned and building in sort of an emerging technology space. And I focused into graph engineering. So building the world's largest healthcare graph. Now, I think we're missing one of the housekeeping items today is we're going to have Q&A. If you have a question, please put it in the Q&A form and we can answer your questions at any time. This webinar will be recorded and will be uploaded so you can have it and it'll be available to you. So you can play it back and catch up if you've missed a little bit of it. If you have any issues with Zoom, please let us know in the chat. Today's agenda, we're going to be talking a little bit about graph, a little bit about TigerGraph, and then we'll go into the Graphathon, how you can get started with TigerGraph Cloud. It's probably the easiest way for you to get into TigerGraph and to get it spun up. It's a few clicks, and we'll actually walk through that today. And then we'll also walk through some of the community tools and sites that will help you navigate your journey of learning. It's a very supportive group. There's always people online. We'll probably see a couple of them today. A little bit about TigerGraph. TigerGraph is about helping others improve the world with deeper insights. There's things that you cannot do. You could not do with traditional database design and development. And what TigerGraph really does is unlock a lot of these potential value that you could never unlock before. And we'll talk about some of the use cases early on. It's used a lot in AI and machine learning. The language itself is SQL-ish like. That's why it's called GSQL. So if you have a SQL background, it's pretty easy to get ramped up into understanding the language itself. There's a few things that you might want to learn along the way, but the community here is to support you on your journey on that. Some of the customers that we have, and then TigerGraph was founded in 2012 and it's located in California. So why graph? Why now? Everybody knows that data, there's so much data. It's just data everywhere. There's data silos, there's data over here, there's data in this department, there's data from this application, there's data from these maybe systems or maybe these devices, everything with IoT, and you got blockchains, you got natural language processing, then you generate more data when you're doing the processing. So there's just this wide breadth of data. And the problem is that we have so much data. How do you access all that data and integrate it and make it actionable and be able to do things with that data? That's where graph comes in. And so we'll talk a little bit about that and how that will work. But this slide's just to show you, these are a lot of top trends that are going on right now. And there is a lot of overlap. It's not just like NLP is NLP. NLP deals with data itself, data fabric, machine learning, AI, that's all data. So you probably don't know it, but if you use Google, you're actually using Knowledge Graph. There's a lot of, if you use Facebook, if you use LinkedIn, if you use Amazon, if you use Netflix, if you use HBO, you're probably using graph in the back end somehow. You just don't know it. And so this is back in 2012. This sparked a whole graph movement. This is from a blog called Things Not Strings. And what this really did was took a look at how data is structured and how data is put together. And so instead of just having strings of data, you now have things, and the things then have relationships to other things. And so you could start to stitch together all these different things and derive insights about the things. Just a little bit about TigerGraph's platform. When we have stitched together data, it allows you to do really deep link queries. And I do have an example, and we're going to spin up a TigerGraph Cloud example of doing multi-hops, going deep. One reason you might want to go really deep is then if you're, let's say you're examining fraud or something, and you want to understand this transaction to that transaction to that transaction, from this system to that transaction to that system and to that system, and you're going through and trying to find these hops, because in fraud, what you're trying to do is trying to like bury that, and you're going, and the fraudsters know that, like, oh, okay, I just keep passing the system back. They're never going to be able to trace me, right? Wrong. So you can trace them. You can go and you can see these patterns of this person went to that person, that one person, that person, that person. You can start to see this whole loop, and eventually you run back, and the money goes back to the same guy. So he's trying to launder money. So that's one example of deep link. The other thing with the TigerGraph platform is it scales horizontally. You can actually just get a cluster put together. It's a box and a box and a box and a box. So the more data you have, and you need to increase your graph. Let's say you want to go to 8 billion nodes, this massive, and you want to house everything, you can just scale horizontally. And well, you could scale vertically, add more memory, and then scale horizontally as well. You can also, what's unique about TigerGraph and graph databases, you can run analytics in the database itself. So instead of moving all your data out and then running analytics on it, you keep your data where it is, and you can run it in real time. You can run it right in the database itself. The new feature that just came out, no code. So if you're new to TigerGraph, new to graph, want to get it started, but don't want to necessarily learn the language, or at least the first step, you can actually use no code, and you can write your analytical queries with just your GUI interface. So what does this unlock? This unlocks things that have never been able to be done before. So imagine you have, in this case, it's a patient, but you can think of like a customer 360 or patient 360 or whatever entity it is, and you want to see a 360 view. Now you have a patient, let's say you have a system that has 50 million patients, and every patient has then touch points within the healthcare system. So you have a touch point where this person went to a wellness check, you have this person that had a claim, you had this person then called into the call center, they went to a visit, they took a test, maybe they had a problem with the claim, which is another department. So before, you were never able to actually stitch together every single touch point within a customer's journey and put it and derive this information in 10 milliseconds. I mean, faster than you can do a Google search. You're able to pull all this data together about a customer or a person and access that data in real time. 50 million people, trying to get 50 million people and every single touch point that they have, that's pretty impressive. It's never been done before. I mean, you couldn't do it before because the technology didn't exist. So this unlocks, this is a patient journey, but there's many other journeys, customer journey, any kind of journey. So this unlocks the ability to do that at scale. Another thing that I'm not into the phones, and I don't understand, like, when I say not into the phones, I don't understand like all the pieces of the phone graph, but I think this is really interesting in the way that it has patterns. And so what you can do with this is you can look at the way that the data is structured, look at the connections between the different data elements. And so in this case, we have a stable group, and that's showing the relationship between the primary phone, which is number one, and some of those other phones. You can also see there's many connections as a group if we're looking on the left-hand side, and you can see these connections between phones. So maybe this is a family, and they're calling from one phone to the other, and that's their call pattern. Maybe on the far left, you have sort of this person calls this person, that person calls that one. So it's sort of this friend relationship. It's another pattern. And then the last one, you have the high call between two phones. So that in itself are a bunch of attributes that describe sort of a good phone. So that's a good pattern. that's not a fraud, that's not a scammer trying to call you, right? And then so you look on the right, and this is the picture of the scammer. So you can start to see many calls rejected, nobody's calling back to that number, and you can see the average distance of the phone calls is small. So what this is really doing is allowing you to have patterns and features that you were never able to do before. So if you're into machine learning, you know, one of the things that you do is you take features and you then use those features to do machine learning. You feed those to the machine learning and derive models, and then you throw data through that, and then you're able to predict. So this will give you an unlock new ways to derive features, and you can just use the patterns themselves as the analytics capability and determine things in real time as well. This is the starter kit that we're actually going to spin up today. This does some deep link analysis. Why I started this was the Korean Center of Disease Control and Prevention released a lot of data that they had around patients. Now, it wasn't the patient's name and all of the private information, but it was just a random number along with some details about the patient, who infected who, when they were infected, when symptoms came. But they also had like route data, which is basically a geostamp with time and date. And so my thought was that, okay, they did some infection tracing. I can see in this picture on the right-hand side that this patient infected that patient that infected that patient that went to the gym, who infected the other patient. But is there any connections between two patients that aren't defined yet? So are there times where the same patient was with another patient that, you know, the patient means they were infected, so we knew they both had COVID. We're at the same place at the same time, and that's what I wanted to determine, because then we could then find the infection chains, even though they weren't actually clearly defined as infection chains. I should say possible infection chains. They're at the same place, same time, 20 times in a row. Okay, maybe that person did infect that person. I don't know, but we can examine that now. Just a little bit about the platform overview for TigerGraph and Graph. Well, TigerGraph specifically. You have data coming in, so you can stream that data. You can, you know, Kafka, Spark, whatever database. You can do CSV files. You can have that data come through JSON. Goes in and is stored into the TigerGraph database. And this is some of the processes that you'll see. When you're looking at if you're using the developer edition, you can actually go in and see some of these processes being ran. And then what this allows you to do, that's sort of the orange squares is sort of the TigerGraph box. It's just a database. What you can do is do your visualization tools, machine learning, business insights. The data comes out in JSONs all through APIs. The nice thing about TigerGraph, my favorite feature, to be honest, is that when you write a query, so just write a query, you know, select whatever is your logical query that you're trying to write. And as soon as you save that query, it gets natively compiled down and exposed as a REST service. So instantly you're able to actually call it. So you put your data in there, you do some like these analytical queries, and instantly you're able to access that capability that you just wrote. Now, we did talk about a little bit about the database, and you can do algorithms. All of the algorithms are open source. You can actually go in there, modify them, tweak them, do whatever you'd want to them. There's a whole graph algorithm library, and we'll check that out as well. So if you want to do you know, cosine similarity, page rank, centrality, any kind of these patterns for different use cases, you can go in there and you can tweak them, you can add them, you can modify them, you can do shortest path, whatever you'd want to do, you can do. They're all available and you can modify them. So today is really about just sort of walking through the platform, walking through the Graphathon, and just help you get started with the community. So with that, let's walk through some of these elements. All right. So the first thing you can do is go to dev post, and I'll just walk through it in a way that, let's just say I'm here and we're in the same room and we're talking and we're trying to navigate this. So I'll just walk you through step by step of how you can actually get onto the Graphathon platform and what it's all about. So we're hosting the Graphathon on DevPost. So if you go to devpost.com, you'll land on this site here. What we're going to do is click on Hackathon, and we'll search, you can search Graphathon or TigerGraph. So you'll see right away that TigerGraph 2020 Graphathon pops up. Click on that. And this is what you should see when you land on the site. So the theme of this Graphathon is really about enabling and empowering. So we talked about some of these elements like machine learning, AI capabilities, natural language processing. A lot of TigerGraph's community are really database developers. They're not necessarily the the visualization experts. They're not necessarily the machine learning experts. They're not necessarily the data scientists that are experts in Python. And so what this challenge is really doing, this Graphathon, is enabling and empowering the broader TigerGraph community. So we want you to take the skills that you have. Maybe you're a Tableau expert and that's your forte. Well, maybe what you can do is figure out a way to create a application that connects with TigerGraph, because the graph engineers aren't necessarily Tableau engineers, and they don't really understand how Tableau works or how it ingests. Maybe you're a React developer and you want to, you're like, well, I can spin up a React app. It takes me like 2 seconds. They're really easy. And connected to another database? Okay, sure, why not? So the challenge is really about building things that will enable and empower the community. So those could be patterns, those could be applications, those could be connectors, examples, they could be complex machine learning boxes. It's really open to whatever skills you have. And what you're gonna do is take those skills and help the broader community, the graph developers, graph engineers, to be able to use those capabilities. Some important dates that we want to go through. The Graphathon did launch, it just launched 2 days ago, so Monday, and it'll run for two months. So you have 2 months to really build out whatever you are thinking about building that might help the ecosystem, might help the developers with developer tools or whatever your submission is. And you have until September 6th at basically right before midnight to submit. The important thing is look at the time zone is on the Eastern time. So if you're located somewhere else, just try to give yourself some buffer with the time zone differences. Maybe submit early. Project voting will be that next week. It'll pick up on the 9th. And then the winners will be announced near the end of the week. September 10th, I believe, is at Thursday. And so Thursday at noon on Eastern time. All right, so one of the things that you want to be mindful of for submitting is that you're asked to do sort of a walkthrough of whatever your solution is. So if you build a connector, maybe just walk somebody through how to use it, how you would use it, how you envision it to be used, just to help other people and communicate your idea and why you built this, how this really enables and empowers other people, how it works. So if you just record yourself walking through that is one of the requirements. The other requirement is that share your code on GitHub. So have a link to the repository that you submit. The other thing is tag that with TigerGraph, just so it's easy for us to be able to find that. And then also have documentation. It's one thing to build something, but to not have any documentation, it doesn't really help the developers or help anybody else to be able to use what you built. And then also a blog is optional. So you could have some of your documentation be part of a Medium blog. So the prize winners, there are cash prizes and there's cloud credit prizes. So you can enable, the cloud credit prizes actually enable you to use a hosted cloud service that TigerGraph has, and you can spin up a box in a matter of seconds, which we're actually going to walk you through the free version. You can only have one free version, and it's limited in the size that you have. Some of the other prizes that you'll get listed on the community showcase will be featured in the newsletter. You'll be able to have a professionally written article about you. You'll be promoted through all of TigerGraph's channels, and you'll get some free swag as well. So that's for first prize. Second prize, it's also a lot of the same additional prizes. The cash prize and the cloud credits are reduced slightly. Same with third prize as well. We do have some of these specialized prizes, and what the most popular prize is really about is there's a dev post mechanism that allows you to share your solution. And so the person that gets the most shares throughout their other sites will then be able to win this most popular award. So you're really trying to promote your solution, trying to get that out there. And if you get to become the most popular, then you'll win this prize. We also gave prizes to the most creative. So if you're really outside thinking, and we'll go through one that was pretty interesting on our community site. If they wanted to submit that at this time, they've already built it, so they can't. So you have to build something from, you have to build something from scratch or from new. Well, you don't have to build it from scratch, but you have to build something on top of or build it from scratch. So it couldn't have been like, hey, I already built it, here you go. So you have to start from now till the next 2 months. But if you have something that's like a wow factor, wow, that's crazy. Never thought of that. This is what that most creative prize is for. We have most technical. So if you are a very like back-end developer that has like 20 years of experience, that's like you're building these super complex systems and you build a super technical complex solution that many people would look at it and be like, wow, yeah, that's crazy. This guy or gal is really good. That's what the most technical is for. So it's really about the really craftsmanship of your work. So if you produce something with a lot of that craftsmanship, that's what most technical is about. And lastly, best documented. So if you're very good at documentation, write everything down. It's very clear to understand. Your code is articulated. You're not using abstract. Parameters, and it's like somebody can actually read through your code. There's nice comments. You have supporting articles, blogs, things like that. You also get rewarded for best document. And then also, if you submit your submission, you just get 50 cloud credits. So if you meet the requirements for submission, and you're one of the first 50, you also get the cloud credits just for participating. So that's a little bit about the Graphathon. And what we're going to do now is show you the easiest way to get started with TigerGraph. And we're going to use TigerGraph Cloud. So if you are listening to this right now, you can head over to tgcloud.io. tgcloud.io is the cloud portal. So we'll go to that right now. All right. So if you're not familiar with TigerGraph Cloud or have not used it, I should say before, you'll want to click on sign up. I've used this platform, of course, before. So I'm going to log in. Excuse me. If this is your first time here, you'll land on the dashboard. You won't see all this stuff here. Like mine has all of my activities and the different boxes I've provisioned and some of the costs. What you're going to want to do is click on solutions. So after you sign up, the next thing to do is head over to my solutions. This is where you can actually provision your boxes. So if this is your first time, what you'll want to do is create a solution. And what we're going to do is basically 1, 2, 3, 4 steps, and we're going to have our own TigerGraph box. So I'm just going to choose COVID-19. Now you can choose AWS or Azure. I'm going to just keep AWS, TG free. You get one free instance. The free instance shuts down after an hour of inactivity. So if you're active on it, it won't shut down. But also if you're very inactive and you're not even logging in or doing anything, the box will be deleted within 1 week. So just make sure if you're actually going to be using it, just use it. If you're not, it might get deleted. So you get choose your location that you're closest to. You also want to choose, well, this one you're doing free, so you get the 50 gigs, and then click next. So we can give this a name. We're just gonna call it my COVID. You can give it whatever name you'd want. 19 kit. And I'll just use the same throughout this. Don't forget your password. So you want to give your solution a custom password. And then you also get your own customized subdomain. So your domain, once it's spun up, you'll have mycloud. Mine's called mine COVID-19 kit with .i.tigergraph.io. So do this. All right. So I'm not going to save my password. So I just have my kit going to be spun up here. This will take about 5 minutes. It's going to provision your box and it's going to spin up, but eventually it'll come to a status where it says ready. So mine, I spun up another one in the spare time I had, and what we're going to do is click on this and click on Graph Studio. And once you click on Graph Studio, you'll land in something like this. So this is your graphical user interface for your graph. So this is the GUI for your database. So this is one version. I mean, you can write your own. This is the one that comes out of the box, and it has some abilities for us to actually drag and drop and design and develop and explore. So we'll get through some of that. So if this is your first time, you just spun up your box. Now you land at this Graph Studio. On the left-hand side, you have a few tabs. You have design schema, map data to graph, load data, explore graph, and write your queries. So if this is your first time using Graph, the first thing you want to do is actually have a database schema. So what you're going to do is you're going to look at maybe the way that your data is going to be. You're going to have some kind of data. So you have to understand what data you're going to be using. You could just grab some data like I did for this example. I just grabbed some data from Kaggle, which was the Korean Korean Center of Disease Control and Prevention. So I looked at that data and then I tried to understand, okay, what would be a way I should model this? Well, I have a patient. The patient has some attributes about it. I know they traveled, so I'm going to have an event to maybe where they're from, and then also an event for a travel event. And the travel event has a latitude and longitude and some dates and like a type onto it. This thing right here is called a time tree in Graph. And what this allows you to do if you're getting into IoT, there's going to be a lot of things with timestamps. And so the best way to access that is maybe looking and going down, okay, I want to start at 2020, and then maybe look in October, and then maybe look at a certain date, and then go to whatever element you want to go to. Excuse me. And this also works too, like this is birth stamp. So give me all the patients from 1965. You can just crawl down from 1965 and go down to patient. So this is how you design. You click on this button up here, add vertex, and then add an edge. And so you look at your data, try to figure out how you want to articulate your data. We'll have these guides that will actually walk you through, and I'll get to those when I get to the community site. And it walks you through how to sort of create your own schema, do all the GSQL. I'm just giving you an overview of how to launch a kit and an overview of how to design and click the vertex type and the different elements within the GUI. So the next thing you want to do after you design this and built it is you go to your map data to graph. So in this case, we just have some CSV files. The CSV files have data in them, and the data then goes into certain parts of the graph. So you have on the left-hand side, you're probably pretty familiar with columns. This is a sample column. You have patient ID, and that has an ID. 10001, global number, sex, male, 64. And then what you're doing with these lines here is actually showing how the data will be inserted into your graph or upserted into your graph. So you have these data elements, and this is how the data should flow into your graph. So you're doing all your data and you're pushing it in your graph, and your data is all pre-joined. So what this allows you to do is derive the features that you'd want really fast. You don't have to think about joining, all the data's there. This schema is basically essentially a map. So you have like a map to all of your data, and you just are going through the map, and you're just saying, okay, from patient, I want to go to here and grab this element, then I go from here to go grab that element. And so you could do like really these feature set extractions in a matter of minutes. The first time I explained graph to a data scientist and they actually got their hands on and wrote the stuff, they're spending 6 weeks trying to join all these data sets together, and then they come back overnight and they're like, oh man, I got this one thing wrong. And then they have to come back because they're in like this queue, and then they have to come back the next day and they're like, oh, we have to redo it again. And then we had the same data into graph, and we said, hey, you could write the query and do that feature set extraction that you need. Within like 5 minutes, they wrote the query, and then they had all their data. It was like this. So this is how you map your data. If you want to add a data file statically, you click on this add data file. If you want to then map your data, how the data from the data file goes into your graph, you click this map data file button. And those are a few elements that you should know for this one. And now we're to the load part. So you have to design, you have to show how the data is actually going to be inserted into your graph. The next element is actually loading the data. So if you're doing it statically through the graphical user interface, what you're going to want to do is click on the start. This will load all of the data that you put in here. And you look on the right-hand side, and we'll start to see as these go from pending to finish, you'll see data actually being loaded in here. So I think this has 1.5 million. It's pretty small. Vertices, I think, maybe 500,000 vertices and 1.5 million edges. Maybe the old one does. Let's see. All right. Well, we'll let this keep loading. And then the next thing you want to do is you can explore. So now you have your designed, you have your data mapped, and you now have your data loaded. So the next part you could do is just explore your graph. So that there are elements that are in there. We saw some of the elements being added already. So if we want to just do a patient, and I'll just choose one patient. Let's see what we have. All right, so we have a patient born in 1959, female. This patient was, symptom onset on the March 28th. So then we could see, if we wanted to just explore, we can see, did this patient infect other patients? Let's see. So let's look through patient to patient. So select this patient. All right, this patient didn't infect anybody, but did they travel somewhere? No. Okay. Well, we chose a lame patient that doesn't have any connections. But yeah, we'll see some of the ones that do have connections. So this is just choosing some random patient. And you can choose do 20. All right. Now we have a large sample size. And then we'll click some of these. Let's do the same thing. So patient infected another patient. All right, so we start to see some patient infection. So these are known infection chains. So for instance, we have this patient over here was infected by this patient that was infected by this patient. So we can see boom, boom, boom. So then let's go to queries. So this is the query view. So if you want, remember in the beginning I talked about as soon as you write a query, what's really nice is that you can actually have it compiled and installed installed and compiled, and then it gets exposed as a REST service. So these are queries that come out of the box. Some of them include edge crawling, and this will actually take a little bit of time. So while this goes, we'll actually move to the community sites that can help you while you're exploring Graph. All right. Let's just go to the site directly. So we have community.tigergraph.com. So this is our community site. So this is where if you're a developer and you run into some snags and you want some sort of a structured way to actually communicate and talk with other developers or other TigerGraph staff members, you can post on here, create a new topic. You could see other things that people have asked other developers. Is it possible to have multiple instances of TigerGraph Developer Edition and Docker on the same machine? So you can actually search this and think of this as like a knowledge repository. There's even the Graphathon right here. So if you want to find the important links, some of the things that we talked about today, the forum, the chat, some different resources, the social sites, the important dates. This is actually one of the posts. So you can just search up here. If you wanted to search Graphathon, that would show up. There's some machine learning. But yeah, you can go through and get help from this. And this is very structured. So what this allows you to do in the chat, what happens is that maybe you're talking and it's real time, but then the chat actually gets a little bit lost in the thread. So maybe if you want to have more of a discussion around a certain element or topic, this is a good platform for you to actually use and create a topic. If you signed up or logged in, you would see where you could actually create one right here. The other things on top here are docs. So TigerGraph's documentation is probably it's super robust. It's probably the best documentation I've ever seen as far as like getting started, and especially from I was on your guys' journey as well. I learned TigerGraph and when I was working at United Health Group, and this is what I go to all the time. I would just search everything. I'd be searching up here. How do you do this? How do you do this? How do you do accumulators? How do you do the syntax for the select stuff? And how do you do everything? And the documentation would answer, I would say 99% of all my questions. I was able to search it and find it and find references to the actual code of how to implement it or how to write it. So if you have any questions, this is a really great resource for you to go to. There is a versioning up here. We just released 3.0. This is the no code version. So if you had the Docker Developer Edition, that's using 3.0. If you're using the cloud, it's actually still 2.6. So that will be updated pretty soon. I don't know the exact date, but that will be updated to 3.0. 3.0 literally just came out. So let's see. All right, our queries are installed. So this is what the query will look like. So you'll have like a create query. So create query, you're just saying create query, and this is the name that I'll give it. Some of these you'll actually see in between these brackets. Oops. Between this, you'll actually see parameters. So let's see different ones like this one. We're going to pass in a parameter of a patient. So if you click on this button right here after you installed it, you would see that this is the link to your REST endpoint now, and you can actually pass it p equals, and then so if I said p equals, 10, remember that first patient 100001, you could pass it that parameter and get whatever the logic was for this query, whatever it's returning. Let's see. Actually, we can just run this one. So this is looking at the chain, and so what we're trying to do is find infection chains for an individual. So did this person get infected by that person, get infected by that person? Did they go to the same place at the same time? So what we'll do is just run this. All right, so yeah. Okay. Yeah, so we can already start to see this infection chain and possible infection chain, I should say, because there are a lot of elements in here that people went to the same place at the same time, down to 3 feet of one another. In some cases, they did that multiple times. So let's see if there's one that has a lot of locations, probably in these clusters. So like these 2 patients right here, and they have a lot of elements that are connected. So they went to the same place in the same time, multiple times. So I don't know if some of these people are living together, that they're at the same place, same time. Now this is Korea's data. So they had like credit card transactions. So maybe that the restaurant or something like that. They also had CCTV. They did some GPS tracking. So that's how the data was captured. But you can start to see these, even though this person wasn't known to infect this person, they were at the same place at the same time, twice in this case. So this is just allows you to do those deep, remember we talked about these deep multi-hops and infection chains. So like, I don't know how many hops this is from way over here, but all the way, all the way down. And so you can start to see all these possible infection chains. This again was with the COVID data. All right, so we'll go back to documentation. The one thing also I want to show is that we have the documentation. You also have, remember we talked about the algorithms. So they do have algorithm library, and that is located, should be located here. Let's see, search. In doubt, search. Search is my go-to. I always find everything. So these are the open source algorithms. So all the code. Let's say you want to see some examples, maybe some paths, shortest, any weight, sure. So here's all the code. You can literally copy and paste it, modify it, tweak it. Whatever you'd like to do with it, it's all available and for you to use. The other thing while we're here, we can go into our ecosystem library. This is the official ecosystem library for TigerGraph. The community has published multiple times to this, and there are different tools and examples. There's documentation, there's demos, there's an awesome list. And so these are going to be some of the examples that when you produce whatever you're going to be producing, whatever solution you're going to be producing, it will probably reside here. So you can, if you'd like to, after you submit it, clone this or fork it, and then add, modify, and then issue a pull request to get your tool or extension or your project or your connector or whatever you build that enables and empowers other developers, you can put this on that site. So this will also give you some examples of things that might be out there. One of the more popular one that people are using right now is TigerGraph. So this is an example of a really good documentation above and beyond. So like if you were to submit and you want to do some really nice documentation like this, this is using MKDocs. And this is just Markdown. So you can use MKDocs to build really nice visual documentation. And this can be hosted this is hosted right in GitHub. So if you're not familiar with GitHub pages, I actually can show you how to do that quick. So if you submit a repo, let's see, I'm not signed in. But if you write this, let's say this is your project repository, and you want to be able to then do this Markdown or GitHub pages, there's a setting on the right-hand side here. And when you go to it and you scroll down, you'll see about halfway down, there's something that says like GitHub pages. And then you can just say, okay, I'm going to spin up GitHub pages and point it at this file. There's plenty of documentation. If you have any questions, you can head over to the community site and ask questions. All right, so this is TigerGraph is a Python package for TigerGraph and integrating. So this is just, I thought this was a really phenomenal example, a very great example of maybe a connector or something that would help other developers, especially if you're like a data scientist and you're trying to use your Python environment. If they were able to submit this as one of the project submissions, this would have been like the model of all submissions. It's got really nice, great documentation. There's supporting blogs. There's supporting examples of projects of how to use it. PyTigerGraph with Plotly. They're using some TensorFlow, some graph convoluted neural nets, GitHub repo. So it's very, very thought out, very well documented with a lot of supporting projects and examples for other developers to easily understand how to use the platform. Now, the last thing I do want to show you is the chat. So if you went to that community.tigergraph.com, let's go back to it. TigerGraph.com, and you're up here, you see a chat button. If you click chat, this brings you to the chat with all of the TigerGraph folks. So these are TigerGraph developers from across the world. They're always online. They're always willing to help. They're willing to share any of their cool projects or give you any advice, especially if you're a new developer. There's a lot of questions that you run into. They were all new developers at one point, and so they're very well adapted to understand your perspective and to be able to help you along your journey as well. So there's 20 folks right now online, so you can just head over there, and this is what it will look like when you get there. So they have just a little bit like Slack or any kind of messaging portal. They have these threads. So you have events, you have Graphathon. So if you have specific Graphathon questions, you can head over to the Graphathon channel. If some GSQL questions, you can head over to GSQL. We have our community forum. So if somebody posted on the other forum, it automatically gets reposted here for other people to talk or to see it. So they'll come in and, excuse me, and answer questions or help you. Let's see. One thing I wanted to show. So this is really cool. So if you do get into the chat, if you go to app and showcase, this is a really cool little demo where they're actually hooking up TigerGraph to Alexa and they're interfacing using their voice. And so they're actually interfacing with their graph database with their voice, and it's really cool. So if you have a chance, go check that out. Kelly from the community created this. He's got many supporting blogs. Give him some kudos. So that was one of the latest things that were here. And with that, that pretty much sums up everything that we're going to talk about today. And let me just head over to Q&A. So if you have any questions, I'll be looking in the chat right now to answer them. All right, so we don't have any questions. Again, if you need some help with getting started, here's some resources. This deck will be available. Includes that community site, the chat that we talked about. YouTube has a lot of great examples with a lot of the TigerGraph engineers that walk through how to write G-SQL, how to get started. The LinkedIn, you have Twitter, you have Twitch, you have the GitHub repo. One thing I do want to mention as well is we do have, when you sign up to the dev post, there's like 4 links. And this is how you sign up. So you click register, you fill this out, and once you register, let's see if I can just register quick. It'll prompt you with a few options here. So you can join the Discord, which is our chat, the review getting started. So this guide will really help you navigate some of the things on YouTube and how to get started with the basics of Graph and understanding the cloud, understanding Graph Studio. So these links are available right here once you register. And then also some of the how to spin up your cloud instance and then get connected with the Q&A community forum. So with that, thank you for joining, and we'll see you in the community.